There we go. Hi, everyone. I'm here with John Ross. And John, you're all dressed up, ready to go for next weekend?
Yes, this is the way I dress us to be a TO
Yeah.
for our event.
Yep.
It's at a conference
I'm
here in sunny Florida. So
okay. I'm a lot more casual today. Anywho, we're going to talk about Warzone Atlanta, which is really soon, and it's going to be really interesting. There's a lot of big tournaments are going on right now, which will tell us a lot about V3 and a lot about different metas and what people are doing. Yeah. Are we
it's
excited
it
yet?
well, very excited. I'll have a really strong turnout.
Yeah.
Um, I think I sent you 34 lists. I have received 38, but four of the lists had some problems that I sent them back, so we're not going to talk about those today. And um, we may have a couple walk-ups as well, which would make it the largest bolt action tournament in the
Yes.
U.S., I think.
Yep. So that's it's congratulations. It's really great that you guys are doing so well at Atlanta. It's a great venue and setting for bold action, I think, as well. Um, so let's talk about what's going on, the meta of Warzone Atlanta. Um, do you want to talk us through what we're seeing in nations here?
Well, apparently you need to speak German if you're going to play because uh, 14 of the lists were Germany, and there's a couple that are lingering that where there were just some errors that they had to fix, just little stuff. So that would actually be 16
Yep.
Germany lists. So overwhelming. And I don't know why. I don't know whether people think that it's the Germans suddenly got super powerful or whether the ability to take multiple rocket launchers is a good
Mm.
thing or a bad thing. So we'll talk about that. Or just because people had German lists sitting on the shelf and they couldn't play them in V2 because they were hard to put together competitive lists. And finally they get to dust them off.
Yep.
But
That could also be, or it could be that it's the last outing before Armies of Germany really kicks in and changes up everything. Um,
perhaps for the better for Germans, I think.
Perhaps for the better. Comparing this to what we're seeing in the UK right now with Beachhead, which is also a big tournament, right? Um, Germany is actually competing with Finland, and we see no finish lists in the US at all, not a single one.
There is a finish list in the 750 tournament. Well, we
Yeah,
decided to do a three game 750 tournament the day before,
yeah,
kind of get the cobwebs out and let's come play,
yeah.
and then the GT,
Mm,
and have one finish list in it. So
yeah. For me, I also think looking back over the last couple of years, this is also kind of weird because you guys used, at least that's how I remember it, used to have a lot more American lists.
yeah,
Americans used to be the most popular choice of army nation, um, just a few
uh,
years back.
Great Britain,
Great Britain was also
yeah,
really
yeah.
popular. Yeah,
It would have been allies
yeah,
dominating the Axis powers. You'd have one
yeah,
Italian list.
yeah,
I have one Italian list this time, um, and just two Japanese lists.
yeah. They've really
So,
dropped out, the Italians and the Japanese, haven't they?
well, personally, I think the Italians are stronger than they ever have before. I was actually surprised we didn't see more Italian take-it spam.
Mm,
But this tournament is 1250 points. It is unlimited platoons. Bring whatever you want.
yeah.
With just this silly rule that I put in, which is just please don't be excessive. So I rejected four air observer and four artillery observer lists from some
Boo,
folks,
John,
and
boo.
yeah, and and when someone submitted a six
Yeah.
multi launcher disc or a 40 dice list, I rejected those and say, hey, go
What?
back to them. Yeah, but we still have a list with 34 dice in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is quite a lot. That is quite a lot. Um,
Actually, no, I rejected that one too. I think at
okay.
26 it's the highest order dice.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And Great Britain has really fallen down in numbers here. The Soviets also very low for what I expected. And we're not seeing a lot of minor nations yet. I think we're waiting on the army books for those before people will maybe start playing them because some of them have really interesting national special rules. But yeah,
I was surprised Hungary because I think their national special rules are really strong.
Yeah,
It's a much more homogeneous field in
it
an
is.
environment which really should have created more, more variation in
Mm,
armies, I would have thought. But I agree with you. I think people are kind of waiting for the PDF to convert to an army book.
yeah.
Um, and I would have thought Soviets would have been way stronger. Their
Mm,
ability to spam dice with
yeah,
heavy weapons platoon and dog mines or AT rifles is so strong.
yeah.
In addition to all the other toys they always had, I was a little bit surprised about. But we'll be I originally had the first lunch. We serve a full hot buffet lunch with a bunch of courses and stuff like that each day of the tournament. I
Mm.
had Tex-Mex built for the first day. I'm trying to get it switched to a German meal. So
Sauerkraut and Wurst. Yeah,
yes, exactly.
yeah. That'll be good. I don't think people will enjoy that. If the choice is between Tex-Mex and sauerkraut, I think sauerkraut is an acquired taste.
Agreed.
The order dice right now, as they are right now, it's between 12 and 25. Again, very large spread, but the average that we're seeing is very much on par with what we're seeing in the UK right now. You're actually a little above at 18.7. The beachhead average is 18.1. So again, a few years back, what I saw was that you Americans had a little bit lower dice averages
Yeah.
than we did in Europe, but that has changed.
Well, it's I mean it is a 1250 point list,
Yeah,
so there's that. But I think that everyone's really terrified of the Soviet 30 dice list.
yeah.
And so and there are a couple other nations that can easily do that.
Mm,
And I think that a lot of people tried to make sure they weren't losing out in the initiative phase before the game began. So I think that's what you're seeing here.
yeah.
18.7 is about what I expected. And I tell you
As for
that,
me, yeah, yeah.
yeah, the biggest thing I'm worried about is finishing games. Now, Warzone is 3 hour
Mm.
rounds, but it is a tournament, and there's always questions about a new edition, so that's going to slow the game down a little bit. And people are playing bigger armies than they probably ever played, so that's going to slow it down a bit. So I'm a little
Yeah,
worried about people finishing games.
yeah.
Last year we didn't have any problem with people finishing games, but this
No.
this, this time I got my fingers crossed.
Mm. And it might be a problem, especially when the order dice creep up, right? And if two 25 order dice lists meet up against each other, that's 50 dice you're pulling out of the bag each turn.
Right.
It will take a while.
You have to
Um,
be really efficient. You have to be thinking what you're going to do before the next dice
yeah,
is pulled,
yeah,
and you have to be really efficient in how you move the front rank up, and then pull the other guys behind it. And you can't be as precise playing if there's 40 dice in the bag.
mm,
Even if you have a smaller order dice count, if someone's got a bigger one, you still have to
yeah,
look at the total bag count
yeah.
in terms of your play speed. You're exactly right.
Yeah, so that might be a problem, but we shall see. We'll talk about that afterwards and talk about maybe how many people didn't finish and how much of a problem that is or not is. We may have to, going into the future, actually lower the points cost or lower the like make a dice cap at some point. But again, we'll have a lot more data once we have the results from Warzone Atlanta.
I think that'll be fun to come back and talk about what I would do differently or what we would do differently,
Yeah,
after some of these events have run. The
yeah.
good news is those trophies are big and heavy, and if you really get angry at someone for slow play, you can just hit them over the head with it. So
Right. And what are we seeing in what people are actually constructing? Well, I'm seeing a lot of armor.
yeah,
A lot of armor. Like 30 of the lists have armor in them. And some of them I believe that there was one or two that actually had multiple armored platoons.
yeah.
So we are seeing a lot of armored platoons. Less so of artillery, but still plenty of those. A lot of company commanders as well.
I thought there would have been more.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sort of it's very much on par with what we've seen at Beachhead and what I've seen from other tournaments so far. But um, I agree, the company commander is just very good, isn't he? Um,
So cheap for what it does. Throw it
really,
in a transporter or a
yeah,
staff car or something, and then
yeah,
he just sits in the back with a 12-inch it's a 24-inch bubble basically
Yeah.
for plus 4 morale, which
Yeah.
allows you to just kind of ignore a lot of pin effects and makes your army much more predictable. And then on
That's
top of that, the ability to pull 4 or 5 dice if you're a German, and just absolutely subvert the dice bag mechanic when you absolutely need to go first, or you need to really press something forward. I
yeah.
will have 14 company commanders, my guess, coming out of it. If I ask the players what change they would make, the people who didn't bring one will say, I wish I had. That'd be my
Maybe,
guess.
maybe. My guess is that if you're combining the company commander with an artillery list or with a large armored platoon, where you have the company commander sitting in some sort of mechanized vehicle and pushing the armored platoon forward, those combinations I think are going to be really good. But it will be interesting to see how the people bringing company commanders do. Like, how do they end up with the results? Did the company
I,
commander actually boost them or not?
I think there's a lot more uses for him than just that. So you take a recce platoon, you get
Mm?
a couple of armored transports, you take an
Yeah.
engineering platoon, and you throw your pioneer team and a flamethrower
Oh
team in
yeah.
there and a company commander. And now that whole barbecue wave is just moving forward all at once. And
Yeah.
everyone's jumping out and everyone's flaming everything. I think a lot of people have poo-pooed flamethrowers. We don't have nearly as many this time as we had last.
Yeah.
But I think they're still good. We'll
Mm.
see.
We'll see because, as you said, there are like very few people bringing flamethrowers, but some of them are, and there's also quite a lot of mechanized or motorized elements to many of the lists here, which I again had discounted, but a lot of people are still leaning into that.
A lot of armored transports. I think there's 43 armored transports brought across
Yeah.
all the lists, which is, we would have seen 2 half tracks,
Yeah.
in V2.
Yeah. A lot more of those, but they also got cheaper, didn't they? So
Well, they got cheaper, and many of them are AA.
yeah.
So you bring 2 or 3 of them, and that's your counter to someone bringing a forward artillery observer. Now, the thing that you didn't put on here
Yeah.
is that I would have expected is to have seen a lot more forward air observers. And while
Yes.
we have a few, and we would have had none before, it's
Yeah.
not the kind of U.S. forward air observer dominance that I would have guessed.
No. No. I think perhaps that people have caught on to that and are starting to bring flack, and maybe that will keep some people back, but maybe also your don't be a dick sort of rule sort of also held a couple of people back because you can absolutely at 1250 you can build a 5 air observer list and still have points left over to buy your rangers and maybe a steward or two or something. So you could absolutely do that.
You could, but I don't think that would be fun for any opponent, and that would
No, it
I
would
don't think
not.
it'd be fun for you. I mean, you're just basically,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're playing a completely different game than bolt action at that point.
Yep. A little bit. Yeah. Um, there's still a few Death Stars. Still a few people trying to make that big tank work. We haven't seen it work yet, but there've
So
been a lot of attempts.
what's a Death Star to you?
For me, it's a very it's a medium plus tank. So once you get into the 250 points or more range band for tanks, that for me is a Death Star. Or if you take a very large, very geared up unit of veterans,
Mhm.
for me that's a Death Star as well. Yeah,
The vast majority of lists are regular and inexperienced infantry. The veteran hordes are rare in all of the lists. As you look
yeah,
across the list, I didn't do those stats for you, but
yeah,
lots of people taking inexperienced shirkers, the cheapest Volkstrom, whatever, the
yeah,
cheapest possible infantry,
yeah.
in order to be able to max out on artillery or these tank platoons. And it'll be interesting because a lot of the Warzone missions, they have primary and secondary. So even
Mm.
a kill points has other objectives that require a lot of infantry. I think I would suspect some of these players that really went out on them may find the missions to be more challenging to win, unless their strategy is just to kill everything. We'll
Which
see.
which is a strategy, but it may
Yeah.
not work every time.
It is
Right.
easier to kill stuff in a lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there are some things that are really conspicuous with their absence, right? Um, so the very top end of the tanks, we're not seeing any of those.
Yeah.
The very heavy AT guns, no
No
one,
AT guns. No AT guns.
no, yeah, exactly. And we've
we
got
have a
one
couple of dual
Firefly,
purpose.
right? Yeah,
We have a couple of dual purpose where it's the HE plus that, but
yeah.
that what I kind of might have expected to see with the new +1
Mm.
hit rule for
Yeah,
firing
I
an
think
AT
so.
gun.
Yeah.
Some light AT guns would have been in the list, none, right?
The Soviet SIS-3s, I mean,
Yeah.
why not? They're still good. No one's bringing that. There's only one medic, which again, okay. We, we lose a lot of guys now to small arms fire at range, like LMG fire. A medic might be worth it, might, but no.
I mean,
Motorcycles, yeah.
I've seen some people trying it with the veteran lists. I've got a friend of mine who's not playing at Warzone, but he plays an all veteran
Mm,
commando list, all with
yeah,
anti-tank grenades. Actually, quite interesting.
yeah.
And he brings a medic because the cost of each individual is so high,
Yeah.
and he
So he
comes at it
tries
from
to
the world
save them like
of
that. Yeah.
yeah, it's a feel no pain save for not a lot of points.
Yeah.
And if you yeah, so it's interesting. But
Yeah.
the German MG Recce bike is gone.
And that was so good in V2. Now it's completely gone. Yeah.
I still think it's good. I think people are overreacting, but
Yeah.
you know, 50
Yeah.
points for four shots that can still move 48 inches on a road.
Mm.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Panzerschrecks also completely gone. Very few Panzerfausts as well. The price increase on Panzerfaust, I think, has killed off a lot of the incentive to take them. And now the AT rifles are just so good compared to the Panzerfaust because they're so cheap. And there are very few Gurkhas as well. So a lot of the stuff that we saw in version 2 is just changed up, completely changed. Um, was this expected for you, John?
Um, I think that assault got harder, certainly, and you had to be much more thoughtful and purposeful about how you do assault in this game. But I by no means believe that it's killed. And in fact, the veteran units with Tough Fighter,
Mm,
with the ability to reroll misses,
yep. Very
have
deadly.
become,
Very
in my
deadly.
opinion, I think they're better, right? But you have to be more careful. You can't just throw
Mm,
stuff out there and make it happen. I would have expected to have seen more assault-heavy armies. I
yep.
actually would have also expected to see more squads filled with submachine guns. We have a few, but
Mm,
where the strategy is to run out, jump out of the half track, and just fire at point blank range because those are really, really good now too. But it's a lot of a lot less of that. I think
mm,
we have one cavalry list, one Polish cav list, but it's definitely going to be a V3 based on these lists is way has swung way more towards the gun line versus an assault line.
it has. Yeah. Yeah. Especially, I personally, I've said this many times. I think it's to do with how much terrain we put on tables because we can modify how much people want to bring gun lines by placing more terrain on tables. So, and we shall see if how that balance ends up at Warzone.
But the Warzone tables are very terrain dense. They are.
Yeah.
There's a lot of buildings, a lot of things to block line of sight, a lot of walls. So,
Mhm.
and that was true in V2, and I really haven't changed it for V3. They've always been dense tables, so
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how well these gun lines do on such dense tables.
Yeah. So comparing the metas of V3 and V2, like what's new?
AT rifles everywhere. I
Yeah.
mean, to imagine a German player bringing an AT rifle before. I mean,
Yeah.
only if you were playing a themed Africa Corps list or
Yeah.
something, or a very early
Yeah.
war list would you have seen
Yeah.
it, right? There are 63 AT rifles showing up. That's just
Yeah.
crazy. And then light mortars, again, you wouldn't have seen them. People kind of just squeeze one in at the last minute when an experienced one to fill in points.
Yeah.
I've always thought that
But now,
they were real. They were really good. They were cheap order dice, and
mm.
sometimes they were surprising because they can move and fire. But 47 light mortars. I think we got one list with 6 or 8 or something crazy.
Ooh, that's UFO style. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. The forward air observers, I would have thought I mean, we see some, but we're
Mm?
not seeing the numbers that
Yep.
I would have guessed. But there were actually more forward artillery observers. And I can give you that number. There are 12 Ford artillery observers and only 7 Ford air observers across all the lists. And a
Yeah.
lot of the Ford air, with so few British lists, we have German players and French players bringing a Ford artillery unit, and
Yeah.
some Soviet
I
players as
understand it for
well.
the French, for the Germans, not so much, maybe, but yeah.
I've always thought it was a good choice for the Russians because they get that bonus to
Yeah.
the radius dice. One
Yeah.
of the a little bit there, and we talked about all the half tracks, so many armored transports. HMG teams,
Mhm.
I think they're really good.
I think so
Um,
too.
in a way
Slightly
I don't.
expensive, but really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, the but you know what everyone thought is, hey, V3 is going to make MMG teams great again.
Mm.
Mate,
Yeah, it didn't
there's
happen.
probably an acronym you could put on a red baseball cap for that, and that clearly hasn't happened because you can see only 3 MMG teams are coming,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then a lot of AA vehicles. So the GMC thing with the
Yeah.
multiple AA shots on the back
Yeah.
of trucks and tanks. Crusader AA. So you
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah. I think the Crusader AA is more or less the king of V3 right now, as it's just more or less the most efficient choice you can make for a single tank.
It, it is so good and it looks cool. It looks
Yeah.
like something out of uh, one of those video games, the Red Alert or something like that. Remember
Yeah.
that? With the
Yeah.
tanks with the double barrels.
Yeah.
It, it,
Yeah.
it, it looks
Yeah.
cool. The same though, I think a lot of people, if you had gone back and said, what do you wish would happen in
Mm.
V3? And I think people would have said, I want MMG teams to be worth taking.
Yep.
And I want light tanks to be not as worth tanking because it's just a Stewart game. And
Yeah.
I'm tired of playing against Stewarts. And if that was your two number one and two things that you wanted to happen in this game,
You're gonna be disappointed.
it's worse than ever.
Yeah. It is. It is.
And if you had said, I wish there were more medium tanks, I want Stewart to go on, and I want Shermans to be worth it, or Panzers or
Mm.
Panthers or whatever. I mean, there's no Panthers, there's no Tigers, there's not even Churchills. Last time I had a 3 Churchill list, which was quite fun.
Mm.
I mean, nothing on that. Um, and then autocannons, which were really good in V2, are still really good. I can make a case that they're better
Lot
in
better.
V3.
For
Yeah.
me, it's just a lot better. But yeah. Yeah.
I seem to be getting one more hit with my autocannons than I was getting before because the
Yeah.
templates don't have to touch,
Yeah.
sometimes
Exactly.
two, and that
Yeah.
makes a huge difference.
It does.
Um, the one thing that people had wished was that on that list is that snipers wouldn't auto kill small teams,
Mm.
and that they took that rule away, and so that was something a lot of people, that, and as a consequence, there's very few snipers.
Yes, but so
Across all the
many
lists,
small
there's all
teams.
I know. There's only 7 snipers in out of all
Yeah.
these lists.
Yeah. I played a game last night where we had 3 snipers on the table and they had very little effect. They
Yeah.
killed each other, but that was more or less it. So what are we predicting? I think John and I are more or less in agreement on this one. I went over all the lists, gave them my usual 1 to 5, and that leads me to conclude that these 5 lists, I'm not naming any names, although I have guessed who a few of these people are. But I think that there's this relatively low order dice German list. It's got 14 order dice with panzers in it. It's got a command officer, a company officer, multi-rocket launchers, and then just a gaggle of small units. That is a very efficient list in my eyes.
And I think we're going to come back and do a deeper dive into some of these lists
Yeah,
individually. This is just the kind of the overview of
yeah,
Warzone show. But I agree with you. A lot of people are pushing for order dice. There's a lot of German lists that are very similar. A lot of the German lists have 3 multi launchers,
yeah.
and you're seeing a lot of Panzer 3Cs. But I think is this the list with the Panzer 2s and 1s in it?
We shall see in a minute when we
Yeah.
do the
Yeah.
deep dive, but it is one of those, yeah. Um, I think this list leans heavily into the panzers, so I think it's the one that has a few darker panzers and a few autocannon stuff, and yeah. Um, Then we have a 19 order Soviet list with T60s. God, I love my T60s. This also has a lot of small units, so MSU, and then barbecuing, which is one of the things that, if barbecuing could work, then that could change up the meta again a little bit. Like it could push everything in a new direction if someone makes flamers work. So go Soviets here.
So is that's the list I think that has the flamethrowers on the armored car, correct?
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, everyone's down on flamethrowers because they run out of gas now on a
Mm.
one or a two, and they are more expensive, right? But if you think about how flamethrowers really work, the threat of them is so
Yep.
you cannot move within their range because they're going to pop out, they're going to run up there, and they're going to flame you. Or in the case of this armored car, it's going to speed it, come blazing across the table, especially if there's roads. And
Yep.
so they change the opponent's behavior in ways that few other units in the game truly do.
Yep.
And so even if you never fire it, you've already had a massive effect on your players'
Yep.
behavior. And if there's two or three on the table, now you got to really, really think as you move. So I like this list a lot too.
Yep. And then there's a weird one, which it will be the first time we've actually seen this done, and it will be interesting. A lot of us have like analyzed this army build, and I know the Juggernauts, the Topher of the Juggernauts, have promoted this. It's the battle snails. It's the RT-17s, the small French tank.
FT.
FT-17, that's
Yeah.
it. The small French tank, which basically has a machine gun, and that's it. But you just spam them, a lot of them. 20 organized French lists. That's an interesting one. I know John and I disagree a little bit on how effective it is. I think it's really good, but it is slow, as John says. So
It's not
and
just slow, it's pitifully slow. Let's be
it's
clear, right?
pitifully slow. Yeah,
So you
that's it.
can't they can't run. I
Yeah,
mean, you can issue them a run order, but they can only move 6 inches.
yeah,
And they've
exactly.
either got a single machine gun on them or for a lot of cost, actually. But he did upgrade some of his to
Yeah,
the low velocity AT gun, which is a 1 inch HE template, but
yeah.
it's only a +3 penetration. But you know, I mean, it is something to deal with. And there, man, are they going to look cool on the table? This
Oh
huge,
yeah,
World War One army kind of clanking
yeah,
across. But
yeah,
but for missions where you get points for being in the opponent's deployment zone or off the table, or for missions where you need to get over and deal with objectives or
mm,
entrenched enemy supporting an objective. I I I don't know why the Juggernauts are so terrified of this list. Maybe I'll be proved wrong.
maybe. And then we have a British list. I also think will do well. That's a 21 organized list. It has the company commander, and that commander can sit in an LVT. I gotta love my LVT lists.
Yeah.
Um, it can sit in the LVT. That has a huge footprint, which enhances the commander's footprint as well, which is brilliant. Has armor, has veterans, has all the
Has
components.
Gurkhas in it, I think. I
Has a
think there's
couple
some
of Gurkhas, I think, as well. Yeah.
I think those Gurkhas
Um,
might end up in that LBT. Yeah.
yeah, I think so too. And then push forward into the center and unload whatever nastiness you want in the face of the enemy. And it
Well,
has
that's
that
that.
trick that you talked about with a lot of units that can be snapped to at the same time. Yeah.
I think he's got at least one forward artillery observer in there, maybe two. So, you can't just sit. You're going to have to
Yeah.
move. He's coming at you, and
He is
and
coming
he's got
at you.
some armor support. I think it's a good list as well.
Yeah. And then we have an American list, which is a again a little bit of a risky move here because it's a 22 organized list that has zero armor. It has one vehicle, which is a Jeep, I think, and then it has rangers across the board with bazookas and air observers, and that's it. A really interesting list, all infantry there. Yeah,
So when I saw that come through, I also smiled at it because it's counter to a lot of the meta that you see in these other
yes,
lists. And you don't win bolt action. Sometimes you win bolt action by killing lots of stuff if it's kill points. But my missions, if it's a kill point list, there's often the secondary is either objectives or table
yeah,
quarters
yeah,
or it's across the board. So just killing stuff by itself, but you usually win a tournament because you played the missions.
Exactly.
And I think this player is coming to play the missions, and I think he's got a really, really strong shot. It's
Yep.
not the list that people would probably talk about normally. I've smiled when I saw that you picked this as one of your top lists as
Yes.
well.
Yes. And this
The,
is, of
the,
course, also done because I know who the player is. But I think that this list also is interesting because it counters the meta. It does the exactly opposite of what the meta is. It tries to survive whatever people are throwing at it with armor and then kill the armor with the bazookas and the air observers. And then have the veterans actually move up the board and dominate the board. I really like the plan of this list. I like.
there's another British list that's out there, and it is kind of the equivalent to that Battle Snails list. It's the Vickers light tank.
Yes.
So he's got, I think, 10 of those Vickers light tanks that are just going to move across the board.
Yep.
Uh, the good news about those is they can actually run.
Mm.
And so between it and the Battle Snails list, there are two double armored platoons out there. They're all super early war light tanks.
Yep.
So it's very much the Ride of the Valkyries kind of thing. But I think it'll be interesting to see how that list performs as well. And with the British being able to bring two forward air observers that each get to shoot twice, forward artillery, excuse me,
Yep.
artillery. That's another one where you can't just sit still. You're going to have to move and deal with it. And um, so there's some really interesting lists out there. The lists are all posted on the Warzone Facebook page, and they're
Yep.
also on the Warzone website.
Yep.
And
And by
as
the way,
these
I will add them in the description here as well, a link so you can go and read them yourselves.
for a brand new edition, I had very, very few errors. There's a few.
Yeah.
I still one error out there. I've actually corrected it. I just haven't uploaded the list where the
Mm.
guy missed the number of units that have to go into a
Yeah.
transport. He got the numbers wrong. But it was remarkably clean, and so I'm really encouraged by that. That shows
Mm.
people are being thoughtful and coming in. Warzone attracts a lot of beginning players. And you can see it in some of the lists, and that's okay. They're going to
Yeah.
come and have a great time. And some people are playing their V2 lists still because they just haven't had time to buy all their new toys. But
Yep.
it'll be a really fun look at V3. I appreciate
It
you
will.
you're letting me do this show.
Well, thank you for coming on, and let's talk lists for the next video then.
Perfect.
Right. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and good luck to everyone going to Atlanta for the weekend. Cheers.
Cheers.